Dobry ranok. It's still before noon, so we can say Dobry ranok, good morning. We are going to be starting our panel on cultural diplomacy very soon, so please, everyone, grab a seat. Come closer to the stage. None of these panelists bite unless you ask them. I absolutely am so honored and so grateful that we are starting the second day of our conference. And this is all about today. We're going to be focusing on what people can be doing here in the United States to support Ukraine and to bring Ukraine more into our communities and to make connections with Ukraine. I can't think of a better person to kick off today than Dora Chomyak, who, like me, is born here in America, but has a Ukrainian heart, Ukrainian soul, raised going to Ukrainian school every Saturday and in Ukrainian Scouts. And that connection to Ukraine led Dora to be one of the founders of Razom in 2014, which has grown now to be one of the largest organizations that supports Ukraine, and they are a cornerstone for both humanitarian aid and advocacy. Under Dora's guidance, Razom has transformed from a grassroots movement to a powerful international platform that works in a variety of different areas, not just humanitarian aid, not just advocacy, cultural work. Razom just sponsored a cultural month in New York, including a show in partnership with Soyuz Ukrainok of Cassandra, Lesya Ukrainka's play. So I am just so incredibly honored to have Dora with us and to bring her up to the stage to speak more about the work that she's doing. Please give her a hand.
Thank you, Mariana. Hi, everybody. Dobry ranku. It is good to see everyone here today. And it's great to see so many of you here today. A full conference hall on a marathon day is tough, but it's full of people and just walking around full of energy, full of conviction, full of purpose. And so on behalf of Razom for Ukraine, I want to thank all of you for being here and on stage, in the room, and in the exhibit hall, and really dedicating your time to advance Ukraine's cause here in our nation's capital. You being here truly matters. Our summits have a funny way of landing at these pivotal and sometimes unpredictable moments. So if you think back, Fall 2023 summit, who was here in fall of 2023? Nice, good to see repeats, welcome back. So remember that was when the House of Representatives was in a complete deadlock. We had no speaker, okay? Then spring 2024, nice, more hands, love that. That was the height of the $61 billion supplemental fight, which passed just a week after we concluded our meetings on the Hill. And here we are amid a government shutdown, but with growing momentum behind sanctions and military aid for Ukraine. And I know we're going to be talking a lot more about that throughout the days. All this is a reminder that while some federal agencies can pause, our work does not. And leadership comes from those who refuse to wait. Even as Washington stands still, Ukrainians fight on, and we're here to make sure that America stands with them. Razom is proud to be among the founding members of the American Coalition for Ukraine. And when this coalition began, just a couple months after the full-scale invasion, it started with one simple idea, that we could come together and make our voices heard in Washington. So we at Razom decided to help fund and shape those first few summits because we believed not just in that idea, but in each other. And now look how far we've come. 7 summits later, this community is now a nationwide network of advocates and leaders. None of it would have been possible without the many volunteers and partner organizations that make up the ACU today. And since there's so many, I know that some of you have come up to the Razum booth yesterday and have had some questions, and so I want to use this time to fill you in a little bit on what Razum is right now as a part of this coalition. Razum now has grown, as Mariana said, from a volunteer movement in 2014. We now have 6 offices, 2 in Kyiv, 1 in Lviv. We have an office in New York and in Washington, D.C. It's about 150 staff, full-time, mostly working in Ukraine. In Ukraine in healthcare, working on the front, working with grassroots organizations in cities and towns across the whole country. We've been privileged to raise about $220 million from private donors, mostly in the United States, and we've already spent over 90% of that to serve our mission or joint work here. Razum also runs a permanent and professional advocacy presence right here in Washington, D.C., one that operates year-round to engage policymakers, to brief offices, to build bipartisan support, and to ensure that Ukraine remains a strategic priority for the United States. And our advocacy staff are here and eager to work with you from coast to coast to ensure your voice is heard. So please, if you haven't already, stop by our table, find out how we can be supporting each other. So when you leave to go back into your districts, how can we be making that impact in Washington and in every city in the United States? Because Ukraine needs the support of the United States if it's to be a secure, if it's to be democratic, if it's to be prosperous. And to ensure that American support, your voice and the voice of the American people must be heard in Washington. And for those reasons, our work here is deeply interconnected. Our efforts are guided and amplified by your voices and people like you, constituents who bring the single most powerful thing I've seen, which is your own story. Your own story in your own district, with your communities, Ukrainians by birth, Ukrainians by choice, but these individual stories, bring them into the conversations with the policymakers, and that's where we see the big impact, because together, we make Ukraine's cause both national and personal for America's representatives. So, in closing, as you meet people here, network, as you prepare for the meetings on the Hill this week, remember you're not doing this alone. You're part of an engaged community of American support for Ukraine. That community includes grassroots voices, professional advocates, and committed leaders across sectors and states. So on behalf of Razum, thank you for showing up, for speaking up, and for being part of this summit. Let's make this another summit that delivers impact for Ukraine, because it has never truly mattered more. Thank you. Дякую дуже вам.
It is wonderful to see such a full room and to be here. And I want to make sure that we take full advantage of our time. So I invite all of you to see our speakers' names and affiliations over there. I will introduce them as we go along. There will also be a QR code at the end that will allow you to ask questions if you don't have a chance during our panel. But we'll try to squeeze in as many questions from you as possible. So again, and I ask all of our speakers to come up with a one-sentence introduction that you will hear as we go along, and they're great introductions, so it's very exciting. So my name is Nina Murray. I work for Razum. Before I worked for Razum, I was an American diplomat. Before I was an American diplomat, I was translating Ukrainian literature. I still do. I look at Oleg because that's what happens. We'll get to that. We'll take to the books. And So when I was working for the government, I specialized in what's called public diplomacy. And public diplomacy is a term that came up to distinguish interacting with the public from interacting with the government. And to all of you, I'm sure it seems like, well, of course, we interact with people every day. But it needed to be separated so that inside public diplomacy then developed the school of cultural diplomacy. It's a tradecraft, it's a profession, but it's not that difficult. The center of the idea is the last 3 feet. We ask, how can we cross the last 3 feet? Because the 3 feet is the distance of a handshake. And you want to cross that distance with a handshake or with some other interaction. So as we talk, all of our panelists have answered this question of how do we cross the last 3 feet in their own ways. But I want all of you to also be thinking about what happens when you can do that and how you can do that more often. So it gives me great pleasure to start with Olga Alexenko, because Olga promotes Ukrainian jewelry heritage internationally and supports the next generation of jewelers. And jewelry gets even closer than 3 feet because it is worn against the skin. And it's very important that we recognize that culture can come in different forms, including jewelry. So I wanted to ask Olga, tell us about how Strong and Precious, your foundation, celebrate Ukrainian heritage, and how do you reinterpret it for modern audience?
Thank you for this wonderful introduction, Nina. Good morning, everyone. I'm honored to be here, and I'm proud to tell the story about our project, the project which tells the stories about Ukrainian jewelry all over the world. And you are right, Nina, absolutely, that jewelry is not about the world, is more about the meanings, images, senses that are close to our skin and that go straight to the heart. And today, answering your questions, I want to use the images of 2 pieces made by our talented Ukrainian. The first piece is the brooch, and it was made in the very beginning of the war by famous Kharkiv jeweler Stanislav Drokin. That time Kharkiv was being heavily bombed, and Stanislav stayed in his workshop with almost no materials left. Instead of fear and despair, he chose creation. He walked through the streets of Kharkiv collecting pieces of Russian bombs, and later in his workshop he created this wonderful brooch combining Russian bombshells with these beautiful, delicate titanium forget-me-not flowers. He turned destruction into the beauty. It became a symbol of creativity and hope winning over the darkness of war. It was his response to the horror around him, but not an armed response, but an artistic one. The flowers blooming from the bomb, the flowers blooming for the hope, for the resilience. And it's because Ukrainians are a deeply creative nation. We were born to create, not to destroy. And our project decided that this story must be heard worldwide, and we did it. His brooch appeared in the New York Times. You can see the beginning of the article. And from that very moment, I am proud to say the world started to discover Ukrainian contemporary jewelry. Later, this brooch was sold at the very prestigious Sotheby's Geneva auction, which was curated by our project. It was bought by some international collector. And that's what we do in our project. We highlight Ukrainian contemporary jewelry art and give it a voice. And also your question was about the heritage, and I would share with you another piece of jewelry. This is the ring made by, I think, one of the most talented Ukrainian jewelers. He's young, Anton Boyka. Every year we support Ukrainian gifted jewelers by giving them grant and asking them to make a piece to the collection of our foundation. That time we asked them to reflect on a specific theme. It was Tripilian culture, the culture of our ancestors. I think you know that Tripilian culture is a very ancient and mysterious society which inhabited the territory of modern Ukraine more than 5,000 years ago. It's even older than Mesopotamia. And if you look at this ring, you can see that it is inspired by the beautiful Tripilian ceramics with its elegant form, spiral ornament. But this ring is not only about the ancient society, it's also about the spirit of Ukrainian contemporary jewelry art, because it's very young but powerful. And maybe it's not obvious, but it's deeply rooted in the heritage of our land. Unfortunately, we don't have old centuries jewelry dynasties or vast jewelry archives, because most of our cultural memory was erased by revolutions, wars, Soviet regime, but it's still in our roots, and it's reappears through the younger generation, through the new generation of artists. Traditions have survived, so they are passing through hands of one master to another, not through institutions, but through people. And these our roots, which cannot disappear, this strength and beauty could only be transformed. And this ring about this story. And this mechanism, we showed it also, is very symbolic. It, if you look at it, it's empty jar, but when you turn it, the hidden plate set with the diamonds appears, revealing the richness, reminding us about the heritage, which is not always visible, but it's present, always present in us. And the idea behind this ring is that this ancient culture shapes us now, and the legacy of the ancient color is the foundation of the modern Ukrainian culture, the culture of color, depth, beauty. Today, Anton serves in front line, and you see this picture, he holding weapon instead of jewelry instrument, and we all pray he'll come back. And it's very hard to observe the really talented creator trapped in the center of the destruction. But our project tells not about the tragedy of war, but also about the beauty. And it's beauty because of beauty we still exist, and no one can take it from us. And our project is about that. So we amplify Ukrainian culture through immortal artifacts. We preserve Ukrainian jewelry traditions, and we shape future heritage.
Wonderful, wonderful. Thank you so much. Yeah.
Thank you.
It's so beautiful. So next, I want to talk about another part of Ukrainian heritage that's all near and dear to our hearts, and that is food. When I asked Ruslan to introduce himself in one sentence, he wrote, "I turned Ukrainian cuisine into cultural diplomacy, transforming every meal into a story and every table into a bridge." Breaking bread over a shared table might just be one of the oldest forms of cultural diplomacy. Now that I've listened to Olga, I think like maybe also wearing jewelry is the oldest form of cultural diplomacy. But it's so important because when you meet the other as a guest, as a fellow human being who experiences hunger, whom you want to feed, whom you want to warm up, it is impossible to fight in that situation, I think. For many Americans, since we are here in the United States, Ukrainian food might be their first introduction to Ukrainian culture. So question for Roman, please tell us, how do we build on that? How do we take that first encounter with Ukrainian food and build that relationship into a bigger relationship?
Nina, good morning everyone, доброго ранку. And food is not just the only form and one of the oldest form of the cultural diplomacy, but I truly believe that it is one of the most universal and old languages in the world. And even with us, when people are coming to Ruta to try something new, sometimes these people don't know anything about Ukraine and they don't have any Ukrainian heritage. That's why they're coming and trying to see what borscht is, what is Ukrainian cuisine. It's one of the most often questions I've been asked. And it's very hard to answer it because it's not easy. We have so many nice dishes to try. And when those people are coming and asking those questions, I see that's where the cultural and culinary diplomacy in particular starts. Because after that, they discover that it's not just meals. It's not just as meal that they never tried, but they liked it. But it's a story. It's a story about Ukraine. It's a story about our traditions, our resilience, and it's a story about our creativity because we do not only develop our traditional cuisine, but we are developing our Ukrainian cuisine here together with you because it's not only about just one part of our old kitchen in the ancient times, but it's about it's being developed and how it's being developed, and we are happy to develop it here with you. And one of the most problems that a lot of Ukrainian restaurateurs abroad, when they've been opening restaurants, they were not thinking and they were trying to adapt our cuisine to cuisine in other countries because it was one of the easiest way. But it's very important to keep authenticity and identity of cuisine here and do not lose it in that long way. And after that person at our restaurant realized why is that and what is it, that Ukrainian food is not only just a comfort food. So in our cuisine, it's not only about that, but it's all about our long traditions, our creativity. After that, this person realized more about Ukraine, and that it's not just something on the headlines you can hear, but it's also a deep connection with the culture. And I always say that at our restaurants and during events we cater, we do not serve meals. We serve meanings. And it's very important because each table, each meal, it either creates a bridge between nations or deepen that connection. And I think that's what is culinary diplomacy is about in a few words. So thank you.
Great. Thanks so much, Ruslan. Thank you. Now I'm going to turn to Natalia Bondarenko, who advocates for Ukraine through education and art, from winning the inclusion of Ukrainian language in the curriculum of America's oldest public university, to taking Ukrainian naive art on a From Yale to Jail tour. And I want to comment that sooner or later, every cultural diplomacy effort realizes that education is very important. If you can reach individuals, if you can reach people when they're in school, especially K through 12, you can have lifelong allies and supporters. It is so important. And Natalia has the opportunity to do exactly that, to train teachers. So please tell our audience what ripple effects you see this having your work and what our audience members can do in their communities?
Okay, it does. Thank you so much for this question. It's a great one. It's a deep one, the way I love it. So we started working on teaching kids how to teach about Ukraine at the University of North Carolina in 2023. And we started with the presentation or a lesson plan, rather, for social studies teachers, K through 12, how to teach about this ongoing war. And I must say, it's not the easiest task to explain the origin of the war to kindergarteners at all. But I think we succeeded, and teachers love it, kids love it. I've tried, and I did a couple of presentations myself. So those presentations are very, very user-friendly, kids-friendly, with a lot of infographics and videos and pictures. And we start, the opening slide is Pan Serhiy, a history teacher from Ukrainian middle school. This video that he starts with, he's the co-author. And he records this video in the trenches, being in his uniforms, and he says, there is a time to read history, but there is a time to write it. So he joined the army in 2022 in February, and I truly admire the teachers who are on the front lines. So we started with that, and then we decided that art can be a really, really good tool, and naive art is an amazing instrument for kids, because it's, as if you're any familiar with naive art, a lot of people say it's childish. It looks like a child would paint it. Well, professionals do see the difference, and there is this painting, famous painting of Maria Primachenko about Chernobyl that was sold for $500,000. So not every child, I love children, not every child can paint that well. So we incorporated naive art, first, of course, to art for art teachers in the United States, and then we went further. We created a series of lesson plans for foreign language instructors, how to use naive art in their foreign language classes. And now we have hundreds and hundreds of kids around the state coloring those weird creatures of Maria Primachenko, learning their new nouns and adjectives. Especially French teachers, for some reason, appreciate Maria Primachenko using her work at teaching in linguistic pedagogy. So we did that, and I fell in love with naive art, working with naive art. When you teach, you learn. And then we went further. We have this presentation about naive art itself and a couple of naive artists, Ukrainian naive artists. We have a VR tour so people can actually have the immersive experience to have a better impression. And we went with this presentation and a workshop to Yale University. And everybody appreciated it. And at Yale University, we focused not on Maria Primachenko, but Polina Rayko, if anybody is familiar. So by the time the audience loves naive art and Polina Rayko with her crazy personal story, I show how this house that she painted looks now, and it's destroyed because the Russian army bombed the Kakhovka hydroelectric station, and everything was flooded, just like this house itself. But we have the VR option to go explore, and when people are walking from one room to another, I explain the symbols of those birds and everything else, and it's like super cool, not just for kids but for Yale University too. So the next week after Yale University, I'm presenting the same at the conference for social studies teachers for the state of North Carolina, where I have this guy in the corner and he's not paying any attention, but then he sees the QR code, and I mentioned that I'm happy to do do the same in your classroom? And he goes, yeah, I do have my classroom. Would you please come visit and do whatever you're doing? And I go, sure, what's the concern? And he go, well, it's in prison. And I go, well, that's gonna be my first time in prison. Okay, let's do it. So after a couple of weeks of background check and training and everything, I'm in prison and I have 48 people painting these little houses with Maria Primachenko birds, and I tell the story how she was inspired by the stamps on envelopes because her son was in prison also, and he would write letters, and she would repaint those little birds from those little post stamps. She never traveled outside of her little village, so she needed to be inspired by anything she could be. So the letters from prison was one of the options. So we did that, and it went really well. And then I thought, anything else I'm not an expert in, I can go deeper. And this is how music and poetry happened. I wrote a proposal to Lullaby Carnegie Hall Music. They have this international lullaby project, and the main goal of this project is to preserve cultural heritage for those who, as a refugee or as immigrants, are losing their cultural heritage with their new generations. And the best way to do it, of course, as with the lullabies. And as I mentioned, I did mention, I'm from Mariupol, and as I was working on this project, I understood that I've never experienced a Ukrainian lullaby. I've never heard a single one. So it took me 40 years of my life, 8,000 miles away from Russian border, to hear my cultural lullaby, my music. That inspired me to the point where I created my own lullaby. It's called Melody of Sirens. It's about Ukrainian kids who are still in Ukraine, who now, all of those cute little stuff that we associate with lullabies, like birds in the sky and then rain and blah, 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 and mom's heartbeat and everything else. So now in Ukraine, that's the Melody of Sirens. So now we have, it's 6 or maybe even 7 lullabies written by Ukrainian refugees in North Carolina. And, my story is nothing compared to what they have as their background and the way they came to this project. So I decided to create another presentation based on that. It's culture as a weapon. It's about different ways to use culture, how Russia uses more like a ballistics to destroy it. They use their culture, how Ukraine uses more like an air defense to push back to answer that. That's absolutely everything I mentioned is free and open, and please see me after. But that was a really nice, cute, nice project too. And after, I need to mention the one that would be the project, I guess, of my life that I'm working on right now. It's almost ready. It's writing letters to Ukrainian POWs, recently released from Russian captivity. Again, it started with my background, the Mariupol thing, and I guess you can take a girl out from Mariupol, you cannot do this to Mariupol out of the girl. So it's a very difficult and painful project. I tell all of those super important messages, what's being violated. I tell the stories of those heroes. I give them before and after, personal stories before the war, and then people. So we started with the political science students at UNC because it makes sense as the target audience. And then as I was diving deeper into those stories, I discovered that so many people mention when we ask them what helped you survive through this captivity, and they say faith, but at the same time, that was something that Russia was fighting the most for praying, for wearing a cross, for crossing, for any sort of action that's related, that a person had a faith. That's where the most tortures would be. So that project is open for broader public, for churches, VAs, for just communities. And I'm gonna say yes, that's the most painful one, and I hate to bring that pain to people, but pain is useless unless the reflection comes next. And with this reflection, we understand our stories, and understanding our story, we find our identity. That was my way to get here, and I'm happy to share, of course, all the resources. Thank you so much.
Thank you. That's incredible, such incredible projects. And I think a natural transition to my colleague Oleg Kotsuba here, who works to educate international audiences about Ukraine through research and publications when they get out of kindergarten a little bit, and by launching digital platforms that make it easier for everyone to access them. Huri also published Stanislav Aseyev's Torture Camp on Paradise Street. It's available from Huri, and it's a really good tool, I think, for advocacy. And Stanislav is a good speaker. So I want to say that another way to think about cultural diplomacy, we talked a little bit about encounters, right, and the crossing of the 3 feet, but you also have to think about time. It is a long game. Again, you want to engage people when they're young as possible, and then you also have to invest in projects that are very, very long term. And so that's the question I have for Oleg. Talk about the relationship between short term and long term in your work, and please tell our audience how they can support your work.
Yes, absolutely. My name is Oleg Kotsuba. I'm the Director of Publications at the Harvard Ukrainian Research Institute. The acronym under which we are known, as you can see under my bio, is HURI. Thank you so much for being here. It's a pleasure to be here with all of you. We're having tremendous response to our publications at our exhibit table. If you haven't visited us yet, please do so. I think that we can support you in many different ways. I want to use my time wisely. I don't have jewelry to show, unfortunately. I wish I did. But I'm a teacher by education as well, actually German teacher. So I love to engage the classroom. I apologize to the camera people. I have to be close to my audience, and every conference is an opportunity to be close to you people. So very often when you do your work, I assume that you have to explain to people what this war is about. Is that correct? And you can turn around here and stretch your necks a little bit and your backs. Wake up. That's right. Very good. So who here in this classroom, in this wonderful collection of beautiful people, believes that this war is about a chunk of land, because Russia apparently doesn't have enough land, already being the largest country in the world? Okay, who does believe that? Please raise your hand. Okay, one person. Okay, very good. We have one person. I love having a good argument with that person. But, okay, 2, 3. Okay, very good. So 4. Okay, we can talk about that. I'm not going to talk about it right now, because the majority of the people seem to agree that this war is not about a chunk of land, because Russia apparently has already enough land, right? It's already so large, it cannot take care of the land that it does have. So what do you think is this war about?
It's about an identity, a race.
Okay, that's a great answer. You get an A, A+. Very good. So it's about identity. I would happen to agree with that. And the reason I agree with that is because I believe that identity is one of the most important things that we can project. It's who we are. It's what we do. It's the jewelry that we wear, it's the food that we eat, the language that we speak, right? The kind of how we talk about different things, the values that we believe in. And we are Ukrainian because of all of those things taken together. Let's imagine that, all of the Ukrainians and all that we believe in, all that we do, all that we say, the language that we speak, all of that disappeared and got replaced by something else. Would Ukraine still be the same, and would Ukrainians still be the same? Who thinks that way? Anyone? There will be no Ukraine, there will be no Ukrainians, that's right. How often in your conversations with different representatives, with different people that you engage, coming to the Senate, to the Congress, you have to explain what Ukraine is about? How often? Out of 100%, who has to do this 90% of the time? To explain what Ukraine is, who Ukrainians are, what we're doing, what we're fighting for. Okay, who has to do it in 50% of the time? Okay, that's still a very sizable proportion of the people here. And the reason that we have to do that is because people don't know. So how do we educate people about what Ukraine is, what we believe in, why it's important to support Ukraine, right? One way is to share knowledge with them, to tell them. However, very often we don't have that knowledge ourselves, right? Why? Because we come from a different background. When we went to colleges, to universities, maybe there were no professors who were able to teach us about Ukrainian literature, culture, our heritage, such as the Tripilian culture, for example, or, the Primachenko paintings, or the Ukrainian food, right? And so the thing that we do at the Harvard Ukrainian Research Institute is to invest in that kind of opportunity for everyone. We are the ones who educate, who support people who then go to colleges, go to other universities, and teach you and other people about all of that. And we cannot do that by ourselves. We are a unique case in, I think, academia in America at least, if not elsewhere, that was founded through grassroots efforts of regular Ukrainian Americans who donated sometimes $3 to $5 a month over 15 years almost to create an institution like us and to create 3 professorships in Ukrainian studies. And we have been in existence for 52 years doing that, creating the field of Ukrainian studies, educating people about all of the aspects of Ukrainian culture and history, society, and so on. But like Nina said, and here I will return to my audience here, as Nina said, it is impossible to do if we are only thinking short term, right? Education takes decades to shape an individual. We're grateful that people like Timothy Snyder came out of our program, for example. He was someone who attended the Summer Institute at Harvard, at our institute, and after that, started researching Ukraine, starting publishing in Ukraine. Boris Gudziak came out of our program as well. Katerina Yushchenko, Katerina Smagley, who is now the consular of the Embassy of Ukraine in Washington, D.C. Many, many other brilliant people became who they became, in part, I believe, because of what we do. Right now is a crucial moment to do more. And all of you do very important work. However, I think we all could do more, and we need to do more. Because if we don't invest right now, we're going to be in trouble later, and I will explain why. Wars have tendency in history to end, and they may end in just or unjust ways, either honoring or not honoring the sacrifice of the people who laid down their lives in that struggle. When wars end, another struggle begins usually, and it's the struggle for the narrative. The winner usually writes that narrative, and the various kind of constellations can happen there. But we all know that Russia is very well positioned to be very successful in the war for the narrative. As we speak, they're investing billions, not millions, but billions of dollars into their information operations, investing in American universities, supporting American scholars, supporting various think tanks, supporting various media organizations to produce the kind of narratives that will support their vision of what this war is about or was about in the future when it's over, and how that narrative will benefit Russia in many, many different ways. Okay? Now, who here believes that Ukraine already now is well positioned to win in that kind of war? Okay, a few people. I don't believe that. I think we are not well positioned. I think, yes, we have the foundation to do some things, but we are not well positioned. And I think the key to making our position stronger is to start investing heavily today. And of course, the support for saving lives at the front in Ukraine, saving civilians, supporting civilians in Ukraine right now should be, our number one priority. That's no question. However, I think all of the organizations here can jointly decide to spend at least 10% of their budget on knowledge creation. And I think that's a key investment that all of us need to make. Dora has previously mentioned the $220 million of the donations that Razom has collected. I'm sure that Nova Ukraine has also collected hundreds of millions of dollars by now. Other groups maybe lesser amounts. Nevertheless, if only 10% of that is invested in knowledge creation, it could create a revolution. Ukraine could be the topic of conversation from heritage to food to art, anything, because then we would have the people who are educated, who are the experts to talk about that. And there will be so many of them that there will be no choice but to invite them to NPR, to CNN, to Fox News, and talk about these things. Instead, today we have talking heads and in those news agencies who know nothing about Ukraine, but the news agencies are inviting them because there are no experts on those issues here in the United States. No one is educating them. No one is investing right now to create programs in any kind of studies dedicated to Ukraine to support that kind of creation. All of this here, you can see, these are individuals doing the work of institutions. And we are in a very similar position because even though we have been in existence for 52 years, I am one person and I have one editor, and I do the editing and publication of most of the books that you will see at that table there. I have no assistant, and so on. And that's kind of the situation that all of us are in. So my call to everyone is to come together and so add to the policy priorities that were listed for this conference another one: invest in knowledge creation and invest meaningfully. Let's imagine ourselves as a NATO, and culture and knowledge is our shield, is our defense systems, our patriots. Why cannot we invest, like all the NATO countries do, a certain percentage of our budgets collectively in knowledge creation, in culture, in promoting knowledge? If 10% of $220 million went towards knowledge creation, you can create 5, 10, 15 positions in Ukrainian studies around the United States. That would completely revolutionize, the whole kind of academic landscape, educating students about Ukraine, helping teachers who come out of those universities know more about Ukraine and teach in the high schools or in the middle schools about the Tripilya culture, about Primachenko, about the Holodomor, about Ukrainian food, and so on. So let's be strategic, because Russia understands the importance of culture, the importance of education. Why do you think they're bombing Ukrainian educational institutions using bombs and missiles that cost millions of dollars? If we could just take a couple of those missiles and sold them on the open market, quote unquote, I think we would have funded the work of whole institutions. So let's be more strategic. Let's be visionary. Let's look to the future, imagine where we need to be in 30 years, and let's just reconstruct that from ground up today so that we are not standing helpless when the war is over and when Russia begins to push their own narratives.
And that is how Oleg Kutsuba got into weapons smuggling. You saw it here first. Talk to him. So it's an interesting transition because now I'm going to go to Andrew Robley, who wrote, I work to strengthen cultural diplomacy for Ukraine by connecting people and institutions through preservation education, using shared heritage as common ground for resilience, learning, and recovery. And again, it's so important to think ahead. It's so important to think 30 years ahead and to engage people in this work now. Andrew, please talk a little bit about your work, but also talk about the people who engage in this work with you, and specifically the expatriate community in New York City or state.
Sure. Hello. Thank you. Yeah, I just want to say I'm honored and feel really privileged to be here, and a little intimidated by my fellow panelists here. But yeah, so I'll start with how my work in Ukraine and with the expatriate community started. I'm from Cayuga County in New York State. Okay. All right, let's go. So according to the census, the U.S. Census, Cayuga County has the highest percentage of people that self-report Ukrainian heritage. So it's kind of ever-present there in many ways. And so through a long, convoluted story and mutual connections, I met my friend Basil, who is a parishioner at the First Ukrainian Assembly of God in New York, in Cooper Square. Now, the First Ukrainian Assembly of God is in a building that was constructed in 1867 as a bank, became the Ukrainian Church in 1937, and they have fully inhabited that space. And I think that speaks to the intangible heritage and culture, which is so important. So through him, we started talking about Ukraine. This is before the full-scale invasion. We started talking about Ukrainian heritage and architecture, and I got hooked as a preservationist and somebody who appreciates architecture. Fast forward through a series of kind of hypothetical discussions with Basil, we came up with the idea of bringing preservation to Kyiv-Mogila. And so it's really through that expatriate community, which the Ukrainian church became my first client. So I was there for all these refugee events where the music, of course, the food, and the literature and the journalism that was there in New York, in downtown New York, which had just come recently from Ukraine, and it was still alive there. And that's like incredibly inspiring to me. And so my world, preservation, is about saving not just beautiful buildings, but places and ways of life. Because the war is about culture. That's been well established. But culture is the land, it is the cities. The cities are made up of buildings and places. And so my work, Professor Chusett and I taught a 10-week course with Kyiv-Mogila, and which included a site visit in April where we were there in person, focused on the old academic building. I don't know if you're familiar with it. It's on the 500 Rivne note, an iconic structure. And as an outsider, it was very interesting to be aware that I was a guest in somebody else's narrative. And we wanted to make sure that we could empower the students to plan for the future of their history. As Ola said, this is the time when they should be planning for how they're going to reconstruct, reinterpret all the sites that have been affected by this war. And so Professor Chusa will speak more on that, but it's just been an incredible journey. And to me, preserving culture is both looking to the past as a foundation and planning for the future.
Thank you so much, Andrew. I think one of the topics that I would like everybody to think about, and that's one of the themes that I think is emerging here, is that, and it's a great illustration of how cultural diplomacy is not just about standing in front of a person and telling them about Ukraine. It's about, because identity is not just information, even though knowledge is critically important. You can't do it without knowledge. You need the base. But it's also ways of doing. It's ways of seeing the world. It's ways of interpreting the world. It's ways of responding to the world. You know, food is a response to an environment. Building is a response to an environment and tradition. Jewelry is a response to tradition and available materials and what's around you. So, last but not least, Dr. Chusa, sorry. You work with students, institutions, and communities in Ukraine, the UAS, and elsewhere to find and share the stories and cultural meaning in their historic places, along with the tools and knowledge to conserve them and craft a future of function and value. We have talked about the materiality of cultural experience. Trade practices like bricklaying or woodworking or what have you are also a unique way of interacting with the world. And you are now working on creating a Center for Reconstruction and Preservation in Kyiv-Mohyla Academy. So we absolutely want to hear more about that and what you hope to accomplish with that and how our audience may participate or help you with that.
Thank you very much, Nina. And again, thank you for the chance to be here. It is an honor. Cultural resources, buildings, landscapes, historic districts, of course, embody stories, which we've heard so much about here. But they're also, I would argue, the kind of richest documents that we have, because they're not just history, but they are the story of the technology and the craft and the people who made it, the story of the aesthetics of the community and the culture and the design. It's a story of scientific and technological progress, and then, of course, the challenges of the physics and the chemistry of conserving and restoring these places. But those stories also address something that Oleg was mentioning, which is they give us our identity. So I remember years ago, I had the chance to spend a summer working at Chersonesus in the Crimean Peninsula, just as the contestation was happening over the meaning of the site. Is it an ancient Greek chora with a history of several thousand years? Is it the place where Christianity is brought to the Slavs? Which church is in control? Who owns the narratives that are there? When Andy and I taught this class, we did so because it turns out that even though so many people are obviously working in the area of preservation and conservation now, particularly in response to the war, there doesn't seem to be yet any college-level coursework or degree in preservation and conservation in Ukraine. And so we had the opportunity to offer this class. And about 25 students signed up. It was which was great for an experiment, an ad hoc thing done through the Department of Archaeology at the university. The students included some people you might expect, like someone who's studying painting conservation. There was a lawyer who was involved with heritage conservation already, regulations and rules like that. Perhaps the student who most impacted me was a 21-year-old kid who was on medical leave from the front because he was basically filled with shrapnel, who was taking this class in part, as he said, so his mind wouldn't rot. But I think he was taking it because he understood how important the places were that were being destroyed and how much he was struggling to save places, excuse me, and identity and the culture of a country and a people through their efforts. So the class was successful. We documented the old academic building and told its story, talked about conservation issues, and also began to imagine ways it could be used in the future by the university and by the community. And our conversations led to the idea that there needed to be a multidisciplinary center at Kyiv-Mohyla that would serve as a place for research, but also introduce graduate and postgraduate education in heritage conservation, and also be a center for advocacy for projects around Kiev and Ukraine. Our role is bringing a certain amount of expertise from experiences. I've been fortunate to work in a number of countries around the world. But it's also important to understand what we bring in the way of tools and then what the context is in a particular place, which constitutes not just the history and the intangible cultural practices and the actual resources, but also how people treat and respond to history, how debates happen around historic places, to understand that even in a group of friends, not everybody agrees that something is equally important and should be saved. But there is something about the current moment which really throws into high relief the importance of having this kind of center and this kind of initiative within the country. Thank you.
Much. Brilliant and inspiring. I do have time for maybe one question from the audience. So make it count. Katya has the microphone.
Yes, and I see a lady here who was the first. And by the way, if you have questions, we have QR code on our screen. So you're welcome to leave your questions and we'll try to come back to you or during a day-to-day, or we will come back to you writing an answer in email. Thank you.
What do you think is the most powerful and important thing that young people in the United States can do to support Ukraine?
We'll have every panelist answer it. Go.
Can you hear me? Okay, good. Okay, wake up, people. Let's engage. That's a wonderful question. First of all, thank you for showing the courage to ask the one and only question, because apparently that's the only time that we've got. There's a lot of things that people can do, especially young people. The most important thing I think that you can do is educate your friends about some aspect of Ukraine and try to match that aspect to what they are interested in. Okay, because those kids, they're gonna grow up, they're gonna become successful especially if they're in education, if they're kind of getting some top-level degree, etc. And they're going to go on to become influential decision makers down the line. If they come into those positions with at least some knowledge of Ukraine, then they will not be the ones making decisions that favor aggressors, right? In general, not just Russia, but any aggressors, right? And we have to broaden this entire conversation to include other tragedies around the world and the behavior of other countries. And there are plenty examples out there that help us kind of understand that, Ukraine is a very good case study for, resisting, for fighting, struggling, believing in the values, but it's not the only example. And we should know about those, and we should educate those people that are directly in our kind of surrounding about our case study, but that will also make them more sensitive toward the suffering of others. And of course, the other thing is to kind of lobby your representatives, your people that kind of have some kind of decision power to invest more in all things Ukrainian, from preserving Ukrainian heritage to advancing knowledge about Ukraine and so on, including, advocating with the organizations that you are a part of to dedicate at least some of their effort towards advancing the knowledge of Ukraine.
Now it's hard to add anything, but I'll try. You should not just leave it there, but leave it us too. I would say if you could please keep your mind and heart open for new information, and don't be afraid of not that comfortable information, and value freedom and democracy, and think about being ready to fight for it if you value it. Thank you.
Hello. Thank you for the question, and of course my answer will be connected with the jewelry. So of course you have to wear Ukrainian jewelry. So it's not funny because a lot of Ukrainian jewelry is very affordable, and it is sold through internet, and you could find it and buy it. And the distinguishing feature of Ukrainian jewelry is its symbolism. Every piece tells a lot about the traditions, story, war. You have to be prepared to start conversation after you wear jewelry, because a lot of people will ask you, what are you wearing? And you're just explaining where it came from, and then you start the beautiful and deep conversation about Ukraine, about Ukrainian crafts, about Ukrainian creativity, and you could finish your conversation with this very beautiful statement that Ukrainian nation is a deeply creative nation which was born to create, not to destroy.
Very easy answer to a very interesting question. Please bring your friends to Rutas. We have 2 wonderful locations to share the bread. It's one of the best opportunities. But please turn your energy into the real force. Please don't stay silent. Just spread the word about what's going on. It's important to start those conversations, because I know a lot of stories that motivated myself when Americans with no Ukrainian heritage at all started a lot of volunteering and very nice humanitarian effort just from the simple question. For example, Mr. Mason from Chicago, he started his initiative on bringing fire trucks and ambulances to Ukraine from the simple question of his daughter, Father, how can we help them? So please, don't forget about anything and turn your energy into the real motivation for other people. Thank you.
Yeah, I'll just echo essentially what everybody else has said, is educate yourself and talk to other people. That's how our system works, supposedly. That's how democracy works. We have to talk to each other. And that's all I'll say.
And I would just add that when we're telling stories, mix it up a little bit. Remember the joy and creativity that we've heard here and that are so essential to the culture. Get people to be enthusiastic and positive about Ukraine and Ukrainian culture and the buildings and the culture and the things that are going on. It balances, in a sense, and makes even more poignant and important and critical the response to what's going on there now.
Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. I hope this was useful. QR code is on the screen. Please, one more round of applause for our panelists. Yeah. They'll be sticking around for a little bit, at least for a while, so please come up to them, make friends, cross the last 3 feet, shake hand, break bread, wear jewelry, and do everything that we just told you to do. Thank you.